Okay, so now this one here has not been shaped near so much. So I just wanted to show you on this one how I was taking here when I was doing my shaping and spinning it on here a little bit, same as I was when I was sanding. That's the same thing. And once I had that there to make sure that this rim was all perfectly smooth that way, then I would take my loop tool and go ahead and refine that rim. I want to make sure that this shape is really nice before I start adding the handle and maybe the little decorations to it, like they are in my drawing. Okay. Here's one that's a little bit more finished. You see the quality of the rim, nice and thin and even. See, this one looks good until you look at it next to this one. See the difference there? That's the quality that you want. Another thing that I did with these is, since I wanted them to be perfectly round, and since I could, what I did is I took one of these bowls right here and actually used that as a guide and spun it around a little bit in that bowl, just shaping it. This is the kind of thing that you can do when the clay is leather hard. It's a good time for a little bit of final shaping because the clay is not soft. It's flexible a little bit, but it's not real gushy. It's going to hold its shape, and it's a great time for doing that little bit of trimming. So when you're trimming, you might think, well, why don't I just sand it? It'd be easier, wouldn't it? Well, yes and no, because when you're trimming, you're using the surface of the loop tool like this, and it's a longer surface. When you're sanding, you're really only using the surface of your finger, and it's molding itself to whatever the shape is underneath. Yeah, it's going to straighten everything out, more than if you didn't sand it. But this is a really good thing to do while it's time to do that, because that's really going to take and it's going to flatten down the hills, the little lumps and whatnot. So don't skip this step. Okay, so this one's pretty good. The other ones have already been done. So I'm going to start adding handles. Before I do, I want to note that I've been working on these for a couple of weeks now. A little bit here, a little bit there. I've been interrupted, so I haven't been able to make them all at once. And in that time, they have gotten dried, and I've wet them, and they've gotten dry, and I've wet them. And that's what you got to do, because I cannot take and mate wet clay to a dry surface. Right? Wet clay to a dry surface. That's just not going to stick. It might look like it's sticking when you're doing it. You might get it kind of gushy with water a little bit, but it's just not going to work. It's going to come off. Okay, so these clays got to be similar enough in moisture. So in other words, similar enough in the amount of shrinkage that has happened to them. All right. So in wetting these, what I've done is I've dipped them in water or ran them under put them under a running water, set them aside. Ran them under running water, set them aside. Ran them under running water, set them aside. I never let them get bone dry like this, but they did firmen up at different times. So I was just patient and made sure that they stayed moist, or I re-wet them and considered the way that I was wrapping them in their bags, etc. This kind of thing is paramount. The idea of how wet or how dry something is, I cannot overstate how important that is. Okay, anyways, that being said, we're going to make some handles. Make sure my table is nice and clean here. Okay, so I've already started making a coil here. So what I'm going to do is, just like I made the bowls all at once, I'm going to make the handles all at once. So I've got that. It's looking pretty even. I think I still want it to be a little bit thinner than that. When I've looked at my drawing, and remember, you're always referring back to that original drawing. refer back to it and back to it and back to it. And in fact, when it's time for a final grading on the project, I'm going to want to see the drawing, and we're going to want to be able to discuss, hey, what were you able to do? What weren't you able to do? If there's differences, why are there differences? Was it something that you had difficulty with? Was it something that you had wanted to change on the way? Why was it? Okay, this coil is getting a little bit too long for me to control now. I'll go ahead, set one of those aside, and keep making this just a little bit thinner, just a little bit. Concentrating on areas that are thicker, and leaving areas that are thinner alone. You can even kind of push into an area to thicken it up a little bit. We'll have a whole thing on coils one of these days. But you see, look at what happened here. And just that little bit of rolling that I did, look at how it has stretched it out relative to the other half of it and how much thinner it's gotten. Okay, go ahead and put this up and roll this one out just a little bit. Notice my fingers, how splayed they are. Okay, that looks like it's pretty good. We can see they're roughly the same length. All right. Okay, so now I'm going to fit it to it. Maybe I'll only need one of these lengths. Looking at this here, I looked at my picture. And I'm going to guesstimate, see if this is about half here. And I think that will be long enough. Okay. Okay. Back of the guy right there. Alright, so that's cut into fourths. And my handle comes out and back. So it comes out and back, kind of in a teardrop shape. And I look for things, it looks like it is level with the top, so it doesn't go above the top of the teacup. So right about there. Okay, so that will give me the length that I need for all these guys. Okay, that's just long enough. And that's a little too long. So there you go. So all of them being made all exactly at the same time. Okay, I'm going to line this up right here. Scoring. Nice and straight. A little bit of oyster right there. And here, might as well go with this one first. Scoring it. And it is going to go here. So scoring this side of it. And give it a little bit of a wiggle and a push. This clay is a little bit wet, but I think it will work. Okay, after a fair amount of fiddling, I think I've got this to be pretty close to what the handle looks like on my picture. But what I'll do is I'll consider this to be roughed in, and I'll put the handles on all of them up to this level of finish. Then I'll take a look at all the handles at the same time once they're on like this and tweak them a little bit to get them just right. Because you want to look at it this way, you want to look at it this way, the top, you want to look at the consistency of the handle, how fat it is, how thin it is, all that kind of good stuff.